So this panel is called the Cryptonite panel, right? This is because of Cryptonite UAE, which is a gateway to the MENA region. If you guys haven't checked out the website, you should check it out. The founder is Sarah, and I'm so glad to see all these faces. We have, all these guys wanted to give me the questions. Not all, but a couple of them. I decided not to because the idea is to have a lot of fun. The way we have it off stage, let's bring that aura and let's bring that energy on stage too. So if you guys love a good conversation and a fun banter, you're in the right place. I just had to sit down myself and then start talking. First thing, I would love to begin with Ajit Khurana. He is a very famous personality. I don't know why he knows me in person, but then everyone goes through a bad time. That's all right. I would love to know from you, AK. That's what I call him. From being in the education sector for so long, right? What got you to Bitcoin? Is this first thing I'd like to start with that.
So a lot of people don't know that for the first part of my career, I was in education. In fact, way back in 1993, I was a lecturer at the University of Texas, Austin. Right? Yeah, this kind of forgotten all of that. It's like a past life. So here's the thing. Actually, while education and then eventually some other spaces such as e-commerce and eventually still more spaces and finally cryptocurrency /Web3/Bitcoin, they seem completely distinct, unrelated. But then actually, in my head, it's not as if I had like 3 or 4 careers. It's always the same thing. Some amount of shiny object syndrome, always wanting to do something new. Some amount of wanting to see how to innovate. And all of these things that I talked about were innovative. Starting with e-commerce and others. So, when I first heard of Bitcoin, it was very late compared to, I believe, lots of people here. It was in the year 2014. Compared to the average population, that's early, but for people in this room, it might be different. And what attracted me to it was the beautiful price graph. And I was like, hey, this seems like some money could be made. And I spent somewhere between 5 to 10 minutes reading about it and said, this is complete nonsense. This doesn't make sense. It's weird. It is money, but it is not money. It's money that nobody makes or everybody can make. And hey, this is just one of those things. And I ignored it. But then for the 2 years following that, I kept studying it. At that point of time, there was not so much information available online. I did an online course from Princeton University in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. And I remember on a fateful day in September of 16, I was completely converted. I started becoming an investor. Bitcoin in Indian rupees was priced around 40,000 rupees. So that made it something around $550 or so. And since then I have done precious little except being crypto.
Fantastic. What a journey of at 40,000 Indian rupee, which is like $500, to where it went a while ago. My dear friend George, a lot of people call him Jorge, but he's a fantastic guy. We have a joke of him in our house, which is called the George syndrome. There's anything that happens, no problem. Right? He is the diffuser and he is the guy who is responsible of running some amazing community here in Dubai and the MENA region. And I'm really fortunate that I've met him in different parts of the world, different continents, no, not yet, but in different parts of the world. George, you have been in tech all your life, right? And then why suddenly EcoX, the community and the idea behind moving from tech and being a people's person or a community man?
Okay, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, everybody. It's always good to be at the local event. As you know, I've been in technology, I think, almost 36 years. So I remember probably my first experience with technology at the university was actually something that does not exist anymore, which was punch cards. These things that are 80 characters and holes in them, and it was the way you communicated with IBM computers at the time. However, over the last 36 years, we have seen massive revolutions of technology. We saw mini computer replaced this massive computers. We saw the personal computer, then networks, which was kind of the first step towards decentralization, cloud computing, big data, which eventually evolved into AI, and blockchain, which has kind of also evolved with a lot of cybersecurity protocols. However, when we have any kind of startup, the startup has several elements to it. Obviously, one element is the investment that goes into the startup. The second element is the technology and the creation that gets done in the startup. However, the third element that is probably the most important in a startup is actually the community that is behind that startup. And the community means really the ecosystem that you build that actually drives the scalability of that startup. Now, that community has several layers. One layer is definitely, you can call it the ecosystem of partners. So for example, if you look at a company today, quite big in our space, we can call Microsoft as an example. When Microsoft came and first started with its DOS system that eventually evolved into Windows and many other things, one thing they realized from the beginning is if they wanted to be successful, they had to have a lot of small companies understand what they do, and they do that on their behalf. And what this company's responsibility was to actually develop solutions around the base technologies that they had put together, whether that technology is the operating system or the database or the office system and so on. So the ecosystem with partners is extremely important. Another important layer is actually the end user community themselves. One of the biggest barriers to any kind of technology adoption is the end user awareness. And that applies to AI, that applies to blockchain or any other technology, because every time a technology gets introduced for the first time, there's a, you can say, a cycle of the adoption. So very few people are early adopters. Like you mentioned, I looked at it, oh, it looks too complicated, you put it right down. 90% of the people have this reaction, or even higher, when technology comes around. So when you build this community around the technology, then you drive adoption at a much faster pace. And the only way you can do that is by creating groups, conferences. Now we do a lot of also networking via WhatsApp and other messaging groups. So it's a multitude of technologies, including social media. And all of these cooperating together enable the adoption to go much faster. Now, what do I mean by much faster? Blockchain has been with us, let's say, give or take 17 years. In 17 years, I think there's maybe 400 billion entries in Google. If you look at something like ChatGPT, which has been with us for 2 or 3 months, it's got double the number of entries. Now, what created that fast adoption and AI? AI has been with us for 30 years. Is this ground swelling of people and community actually using the technology. Now, let me add one other thing. How did I discover ChatGPT? Not because I was looking after it. It was my kid studying in university. Dad, I need something. I said, okay, what do you need? You know, they're always asking you for money for something. I said, oh, I need to have this thing to verify my paper. I said, okay. It's called Turnitin, that doesn't matter. It's something you subscribe to, you submit your university paper, and it tells you if there's any plagiarism or some other things. And I said, okay, but you wrote the paper, no? So why are you asking me to pay to check that your paper is okay? Well, so in reality, the kids today don't write papers, they talk to ChatGPT. ChatGPT generates 80% of the paper, and then they just clean it up. So, which is actually good, I don't see that as bad. It really means that today you can use this AI technology as a co-pilot or as a co-driver that allows you to move much faster and much more rapidly. Whether that happens to be writing a paper at university, doing social media posts, or maybe creating some video or audio content. So the world is changing.
This is brilliant. You know, indeed, the world is changing. Moving on to my dear friend Minal. So you are doing your PhD in CDB, you know, the CBDC. My quick question, close-ended question is CBCD evil?
What is that?
Is CBDC evil?
Why?
I'm asking you, is it evil, yes or no?
I don't know.
Okay. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Sure. So I could say that.
Close-ended question.
Sure. So to the extent that people consider crypto as being a democratic democratic way of distributing value, CBDCs are, I think, the most dangerous thing when it comes to like privacy, in terms of like people's monetary privacy, how they spend their money, how money moves within the system. Also, funds that can be literally turned off by the government seems to me not something that a lot of people would be super interested in. Certainly not me. So I think my problem with CBDC is more about on the privacy aspect. Love to hear your question.
Sorry, I didn't hear, like, you know.
Yeah, I think there's
no
monetization.
CBDC is
Firstly,
not-
great job on the weight loss that you've had.
Thank you. So no, CBDC is not really evil. My thesis is about like programmable money. So it's all about like how the government, they can, like, you know, put ahead, like, you know, the customers, and like they know where the money is going. For example, in the last pandemic that we had, a lot of money went, like, you know, to the people, but they use it, like, you know, for stock markets, for speculation. So in this case, for example, if we have 5 pandemics or whatever, so the money will be only asset, like, you know, and allocated to its value or, like, you know, its purpose, right? So it's not evil in this side, and like how the government they are doing it like on a very international level, means, like, you know, cross-border payments. And I'm sure that the retail CBDC that a lot of people they are scared of is not as evil as what FTX did, or as many crypto companies are doing. So I'm sure, like, you know, the regulators, they are like on our side, and the retail CBDC is coming. I'm not sure how, like, you know, we're gonna like be imprisoned in this, like, you know, in our freedom to use our money. But I'm sure that it's gonna be less risky than other crypto payments that we have now. Take, for example, USDT or Tether. We don't know how much is collateralized. So at least, like, you know, a CBDC it's backed by a central bank. A central bank has, like, you know, a reserve. Yeah, we can argue if, like, you know, the Fed has really, like, you know, the money or not, how much we are printing, but we are talking about, like, you know, big corporations, big, you know, central banks around the world, and I'm sure that CBDCs they are here, like, you know, to protect the customers and not, like, you know, to be an evil, like, you know, at the end of the day, this is why, like, you know, crypto is very great, because we have this decentralized world that we can always go back, and I'm sure, like, the governments can never stop us to use, like, you know, decentralized. This is why, like, you know, they are, like, you know, moving the regulations to us and not like us going to them. So it's not evil. Hope so.
It's not evil. It's, you know, you were just reminded me, you know, that, you know, the fruit doesn't fall too far from the fruit doesn't fall too far from the tree. You just spoke like a true diplomat. Your dad will be very proud of you. Robert.
Hi, Vali.
So Robert is a dear friend, and he's the advisor. He's on the board for a couple of VC firms, but is also raising money for his very unique and a very interesting project.
It is.
Right? But you have a problem with VCs. Let's address that right now. We have few on the table. Let's address it right now. Let's go ahead.
Thanks, mate. Thank you very much for inviting me. Yeah, so let's talk about VCs. Anybody in this room, put your hand up right now if you're a VC. All right. 2 of you. Okay. And one of my right, obviously.
And on your left.
Yes,
And,
we have a few.
and even here.
Yep. So let's talk about VCs. So let me think how I can address this without insulting anybody. So we were talking about, before we came on the panel, what kind of question is Vali going to ask? And he wouldn't tell us. So thanks, Vali, for putting me in this compromising situation with 5 or 6 VCs here.
I love it.
Yeah, it's true. I'm raising money. We have a startup. I'm based in Hong Kong. we have a custody, a fairly unique, innovative custody solution. I guess the best analogy I have was taken from that Warren Buffett transaction statement I sent you. Does anybody know Temasek Holdings in Singapore, right? So allegedly, I have to use the word allegedly, the FTX debacle, they pay somebody like Boston Consulting $100 million a year to do the due diligence before they go out and invest in companies. So my question going back is, how did that work out? So I talked to many VCs, and I've been investing in startups for 25 years. And I just feel that there is a FOMO kind of situation here where they don't really do the due diligence, and they tend to follow whatever is the cool thing right now. So apparently, there is the exception, of course. I'll leave it at that, I think.
I want Jason to respond to that. I think he's ready to respond to that.
No, I'll just say that Temasek basically is a quasi-government agency. So they have a lot of control over how they make essentially things happen in Singapore. Temasek's portfolio company, MediaCorp, actually sued us. We beat them. It was a multi-million-dollar lawsuit. So I'm certainly not best friends with Temasek, although their direct, I believe their COO was an advisor at our company. But yeah, so Temasek tends to kind of run roughshod over due diligence, particularly because they have so much control on the other side. As in, they can really make sure that companies are successful, particularly if they're based out of Singapore. But then otherwise, they can also certainly make sure that a company is not successful if that's what they wanted as well. So I guess they kind of don't really bother with due diligence. But I guess a lot of investors, they rely on the due diligence for the lead investor, right? So if you have like a lead investor that's putting a lot of funds, the assumption is that they've done their homework, right? And I think that's basically been one of the biggest problems with FTX, is that a lot of people did due diligence, a lot of people sort of depended on other people's due diligence. But if you look at the overall problem with FTX, right, the fact that you have essentially a company that was able to raise millions of dollars without giving out board seats, without having any investor on the board, to where they could actually make make decisions on how those funds are used, for example. So you have a situation where basically somebody has raised massive amounts of funds and there's no control, right? There's no CFO. So I mean, that's one of the issues with FTX in the first place.
Okay, thank you. Coming over to you, right? Now, let's actually, Jason, Ali and me, we had a long discussion about tokens versus equity. I want to bring that up here, and I want to start with you first, and like in about a minute, token versus equity. Which one would you look at when you're putting your money down?
If I'm not specifically worried about the ethics or the regulatory aspect of the investment instrument, if this particular project is not causing me that, in that situation I would prefer token, because I know there is liquidity at the end of the situation. When I invest in private equity, I don't know how many of them will exit, even if the companies do well. However, when there might be issues such as, is this guy going to run away with my money? Then some of the additional protection that public law or Companies Act or other such legislation provides makes me feel a little comfortable. All things put together, my ideal scenario is to invest in high quality tokens.
Thank you. George, when you advise companies, tokens or equities?
Actually, that in itself is going to get resolved very, very soon. Everything is going to become security tokens. I think people are trying magically to say this is a utility, this is not a security. Trust me, maybe 1 year, maybe 3 years, maybe 5, but everything will become security. Maybe 1 or 2 tokens will be left as utilities, including, for example, Bitcoin, almost, if you consider that, or maybe Ethereum, but the rest will all be. And the point is actually very simple. If a token has nothing behind it, other than just the people, so it's the credibility of the people to buy or use the token that will preserve its value. So most tokens will have what I would sometimes call a Burj Khalifa. Everybody here knows what a Burj Khalifa is for a token? Also not a name for a pump and dump. So it means it goes up, as fast as it goes up, it comes down. Okay, the people that are smart and know what's happening might be able to sell at the right time, but very few people make a lot of money, but most people lose a lot more money, which is not good. However, once something is an asset-backed token, and the asset backing does not matter what it is. It could be sugar, it could be US dollars. That's what Tether is to some extent, as long as you can prove it's there. Gold, real estate, cars, art. The token is actually a title deed or a claim of ownership. So it's actually a digital share. Digital bond doesn't matter. So you can trade that token, and that token might be traded at different values at different times based on the perceived how fast you want to sell it, how fast you want to buy it in the market value. But in the end, the last person left holding the token can go and claim what is theirs physically. So definitely securities is the way to go.
Okay, so there's a new angle to this entire thing. Now, Manal, I have a different question for you, right? And hopefully this time my question doesn't fall flat. My question is that you are a pretty young, beautiful lady, but you started crypto way young. How did that happen for you?
Yeah, we were just talking about it before. So yeah, I finished my studies in France, and then
And if I'm not wrong, you got into crypto in 2016? Which year?
2017.
17, okay.
Yeah. So I finished. I had the major in a master in finance. I moved to Asia for my graduate internship in Singapore in a Standard Chartered Bank, and then I decided to just go to South Korea just for a visit. For 5 days, trip, I ended up staying there for 2 years. So I got my first job in South Korea with one of the leading L1s back then. It was an ICO. For my parents, they thought I was working for something like Samsung, which is no. I was not working for a Samsung company. No, it was a startup, an ICO. Especially back then in 2017, 18, everyone was thinking crypto is a scam and everything. And moving forward, I started the PhD. Back then, I just wanted to have certain credibility, because in 2018-19 we were in a bear market worse than this one. So we only had from my point of view back then, only by education that I can spare awareness about crypto and Bitcoin. But I didn't know that I will be now we will have all this awareness and all this adoption. So my message to everyone, we are already we've been through a lot, and we are even if it is a bear market now, I don't feel the bear market that we had, given the awareness and the adoption that we have. All the the Web 2 companies, they are moving to Web 3, and that's itself it's a very good sign for our market.
Thank you. My dear friend Robert, my question to you is, as a founder, right? When somebody comes into investing into your brilliant company, and I truly believe in your product and the security that you guys are offering, would you like to give out equity or tokens? Which one would you prefer as a founder to give out to VCs or sharks, like how we call them?
Yeah, I was dreading that question, Maddie. So I'm an old-fashioned guy, and for me, it's still about cash. I know Jason is going to argue and discuss this with me and going to educate me. But at the end of the day, at the end of the day, we have to pay salaries. We have to pay a lot of people cash. They have to go out and buy food. Now, Jason was trying to educate me earlier that they can be paid in crypto, they can go and convert it to fiat, and they can still go out and buy their food and pay for their rent. So it's a tricky one. I mean, for me, it's still equity and cash, but I obviously see the move to be able to pay people in crypto. The risk there is that the crypto could be highly volatile sometimes. I guess fiat can also be highly volatile as well. But so yeah, I'll defer that one to Jason, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Actually, AK has a question for Robert.
So Robert, on the utilization of funds, like you gave the example of the fact that you have to pay salaries, right? I think that problem has long since been solved. Even if you were to only have, let's say you don't have even a bank account, you can always do third-party OTC authorized OTC providers, including MAS approved OTC providers, make sure that your employees get fiat while you have sent out crypto. So that cannot be the distinguishing factor. It really has to be this question of equity versus tokens, is what is it that you want to give away? For instance, if you are fractionalizing the ownership of your company, that's the definition of equity. Your token could also fractionalize the ownership of your company, but it may not. It may basically fractionalize anything, such as your cash flows or whatever else you choose to. So assuming that you can spend fiat even if you have crypto, how will you come up with this decision?
Wow, that's really blowing my mind. Again, it comes down to, are we talking about the giving away the equity of the company or paying for the staff of the
question
company?
continues to be fundraising,
Fundraising.
equity as an instrument versus token. Let's assume that you have to choose between one of these two.
Again, I still have to go back to equity. But I'm sure Jason's going to say the opposite to me.
So to start off with, as Ajit was pointing out, a fiat is extremely easy to get in terms of if you get paid with crypto. All fiat that I own now is one split crypto. Like none of my fiat will ever start off as crypto. So that's fairly easy. The question I think that Ajit was trying to drill into is what exactly it comes down to as a founder, what exactly do you want to give away, right? So you can give away a piece of your company, you can essentially fractionalize your company and give that away. Now that would be effectively a security token because you're essentially fractionalizing ownership in your company. Now you could more usefully, I suppose, you could fractionalize the utility within your company. So a good example, for example, would be Disney parks, right? So I can say, all the funds that come in through Disney parks, I'm going to separate that from the main Disney business and ensure that those are based off of the token economy. So you can buy a share solely in the utility coming out of Disney parks and not in the broader equity of the Disney corporation, right? It comes down to how you structure your company. Now going back to the broader question from a VC perspective, right? My preference is almost always tokens. And it comes down again to what Ajit was saying in terms of liquidity, right? With an equity investment, you're looking at 8 years, probably 5 to 8 years before any of that is going to become liquid, right? And even if that happens, it could, you really have very, very, very little control over how that thing plays out, right? When it comes to tokens, you have an increased amount of control, mostly because of the fact that these are liquid in the first place, right? Mostly because they're liquid, you have an increased amount of control because those token holders can exert an enormous amount of pressure on what you guys are trying to do, right? Like, for example, instead of having 5 investors, you have 1,000 in a Telegram group telling you, hey, we're going to sell your token if you don't do X, Y, and Z. Right now, that's an extreme amount of pressure. You don't even need to have regulatory pressure. You don't even need to have voting shares if you can cause that kind of volatility in the company. So it's almost always for me a question about tokens. Now, one thing that I see fairly often when it comes to investment, I've seen a lot of companies come to me and they say, oh look, we're doing an equity round and we're doing a token round. To me, that seems scammy. That seems scammy because as a young company, you're only going to have so much value. So if you split it between tokens and equity, you're essentially splitting the value, right? Somebody who, let's say, has an equity position in the company, the director of the company has a fiduciary duty to ensure that profits go to those people. Now, that is not true for token holders, right? So, for example, who protects the token holders? You don't want to be a second-class citizen where you've invested in the token and the guy, most of the value is accrued in the equity of the company. That becomes also, a really complicated question in terms of understanding the token architecture. Where does the value of this company distribute? Is it value distributed to the equity holders? Is it value distributed to token holders? Right? So you could structure that any way. If you could, for example, if you section off Disney parks from the rest of Disney, that would be a significant amount of revenue that essentially Disney doesn't have access to. So if you're an equity holder in Disney, you're not getting paid for the people that go into the park. Right? So it really depends on exactly what you want to buy their value to. And that's, from an investment perspective, that's what we're looking at. Now, if you make an investment both in equity and tokens, then you have an issue where down the line somebody might sell those, they might sell their tokens, but now they still have equity. So now they still have, you still have a responsibility to ensure that they profit from the functioning of the company, but they don't own the tokens, they still own equity. So this is to me, it's almost always tokens, and generally when people are doing equity and tokens, I'm extremely suspicious.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't know how much time I have left, but I'm just going to each one of you right? And just ask you all questions around something in my head. I want to start with George here. George, and I want to know how, like, one thing that you do to find if a project is a scam.
Certain rules. I mean, obviously there is.
And you had a big smile after understanding the question.
Okay, I think there's two parts to that answer. The first part, of course.
We might have a little challenge with time, so if you can.
Make it fast?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, if it plays on Burj Khalifa, there's a good likelihood that it's a scam. If you want the longer answer to the question, come to see me after the speech.
Okay. Let's talk about. So Jason here is pretty legendary, not in just the ways of the kind of work that he's done from the age of 13 while going to the AT&T chairman and getting broadband to where? To India, and he's done some legendary stuff. But in our space, what I'm really interested in he flipping $300,000 in $6.5 million in 30 days, right? Now that was pretty interesting. How was the adrenaline at that point of time? Can you just give us some idea on that?
On why that was happening?
Yeah, while it was happening,
Sure.
and then you were like, oh, like that, yeah.
Sure, I'll explain. Actually, October was a bull market, not this October, but last October. And so a lot of the companies that we were investing in NFT tech were able to basically do a 10x, 20x, and we had like a 10x unlock. So I was able to roll the same funds beginning from the 1st of October into multiple companies, because the company would do the IPO, we'd get 10-20% off, and then I was able to roll those funds back into future investments. And because of a lot of companies really wanted our logo on their deck as one of their institutional investors, mainly to send that. The reason that a lot of projects look for institutional investors is because they're trying to send the message to the retail investors on the other end that this is a company worth buying. Because retail investors are not tokenomics experts. They don't understand how to determine whether a token is value or not. They're essentially relying on institutional investors that have tokenomics experts that have actually studied the token and presumably understand that there's value there. So companies that have really good tokenomics experts, those institutional investors tend to be more prized to have on your deck, because that basically sends a particular message. So we had a lot of companies come to us because really they just wanted us on their deck. And so it was sometimes a matter of like making an investment for 3 or 4 days before the company was able to like launch and be able to like 20x and take the funds back out and reinvest them. So it was a really good month because there were so many projects launching. A lot of times we were making investments like 3 or 4 days before we were making them, getting the funds back. So we were able to like roll those funds, I think, to about 20 companies or 25 companies, and we ended up with growing that $3,250,000 to like $6.25 million.
Congratulations. Come on guys, please give him a round of applause. You know, now from talking from $6.5 million, let's talk about 6 Lambos. Okay, so Ajit has lost a lot of bitcoins in his life. I would love to understand the mindset of how do you get back after a loss.
That's a really tough one, and I know that you are hoping that I'll start crying on stage. Right?
6 Lambos! 6 Lambos, one for each of us, except for Robert.
No, Robert, you get one too. But you get equity in that Lambo, not the Lambo itself. Yeah, so to be honest, I think anybody who's been in crypto for many years, like people who are in it since 11, 12, 13, everybody has lost crypto, and there are 2 reasons for that. Number one of the things that kept me away when I first explored in 2014 was how you could store them in Electrum wallet and all sorts of nonsense. So it used to be much more geeky to be able to save that. In my case, however, and this is really paradoxical, I did not lose my Bitcoin, not crypto in general, but specifically Bitcoin, because I did not know how to store them. It was not ignorance. It was because I knew a lot. As in, I was like absolutely perfectly secure.
Like, this cannot happen to me. I know this. I got it covered.
Yeah, so the first time actually it was really silly. I lost it in 2 tranches. The first time around, I stored my seed phrases in a Google Doc. Nobody accessed that Google Doc or device, but well, as in nobody accessed from my side. I never let the password be known. But clearly, in some hacker
Different
malware.
realm in the world.
So then I was like, obviously it is stupid to like keep it in any digital version. So if I have to keep some private key, first of all, forget the seed phrase also. Go with the private key and keep it physical. So then what do? Now it becomes really difficult because if you write it on paper, you use the paper, it can catch fire, blah blah. So I actually got it on metal, as in engraved on metal, and that too not at like one location, right? And then
Multiple locations.
so you can divide the seed phrases, right? As in even the private key you can divide into as many parts,
Right.
so that you need all the parts together to be able to put it together. But you can overdo that, and that means even one part lost is everything lost, right? Having said that, I have been part of some security organizations such as Roberts, etc., and seen what they do. Like I know how Coinbase does custody. I know a bunch of those, and I think that if I were an institution where I did not individually have to take care of all the, let us say, signatures, today you can do a really good job. Okay, but if everything has to be stored by one person, it's still susceptible to error.
So I'll rephrase my question quickly. I was talking about the mindset. The mindset, right? When it happens then and there, how do you recover it? Because right now,
I recommend alcohol, but since I don't drink, that solution is not available to me. And there could be some stronger stuff, I'm sure. If I don't even have alcohol, so I think that basically you have to find a way to not think about it and fool yourself that you actually acquired them. So my cost of acquisition of those Bitcoin was under $700, and you keep marking it at that 700. That I lost 700 multiplied by the number of Bitcoin as opposed to 70,000 or whatever it's going to become, because neither John McAfee was right nor Balaji was right about the $1 million Bitcoin. Whatever you benchmark it, put it at cost of acquisition.
No, but we actually were able to quantify it today outside at the smoking zone, 6 Lambos.
That is what you don't do. That is exactly.
That's exactly what you don't do. George, since you advise so many companies, you get a lot of tokens. And I've seen his wallet, okay, of the tokens. How do you control your temptations of not selling them off when they hit the peak?
Actually, some of the tokens we keep kind of as reminders of history of what not to do in the future. But it's a good, you frame it, you put it on the wall, and we call this expensive lessons. At the end of the day, crypto and blockchain is not different than startups and any other domain. So let's assume, let's say you're in the medical domain and you do drug research for medical purposes. What's the amount of drugs that actually survive? Probably 1 or 2% out of 99 ones that get invented. The same thing happens in blockchain and technology projects. It really means you have to fail many times for one to actually succeed. But I think you have to keep walking. That's why you don't need the Lambo.